Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben. How are you?
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday. I'm good.
Happy Friday to you too, and welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation, and this week we are going to talk a little bit about talent and also some of the results of a meeting I ran, of the first membership meeting I ran on Tuesday for the Insurance Network. More of that later. Let's start with some news. Ben, let's go with yours first. I think you found this in the FT around how we're all completely doomed, just like Dad's army. Is that it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of that. It's like, really, this is more of the story around how insurance is becoming the front line of climate change and its role, and I suppose its responsibility.
Yep.
And Helen Thomas has written quite a bit about this, as well as she writes a lot about other things she writes well. But the start point really is that, you know, insurers are going bust in a lot of places because they can't get the rates up, or are not allowed to get the rates up to cover the risk. So the catching up with what these climate change risks are is extreme, and that they have to move fast. So if anything slows that down, that's an issue. So, for example, I think they've said that, you know, climate-related insured losses are 50%, 54% above the 10-year average. That's Swiss Re saying that. So, in other words, that just means there's a lot more climate-related classified risk happening and being paid out on, and massively more, in fact, I think, than they thought, even, you know, when they started to try and do these estimates. So the forecasts are running way ahead of what people thought, even in the insurance industry. And so it's going to be problematic. So in lots of parts of the world, including places like Florida, you know, property is becoming uninsurable. A third of the, only a quarter of the climate-related risks in Europe apparently are covered by insurance at the moment. So this is a real worry for everybody, and should be a worry for everybody, because if you can't insure these things, then, you know, there is a financial gap problem coming up if things happen climate related, and they are happening. Yep. And then what Helen, really interesting, we kind of know that stuff, right? But what Helen's talking about now is the insurance world sort of, I suppose, kind of tying itself in knots, or what she described as a climate doom loop, in which the insurance industry needs to respond to this, but they're caught up, and other factors are catching them up in this kind of really difficult situation in which they can't cover things, or they're having to exit markets, or they're having to pull out of things and not do it, and then other things happen. So the first thing she talks about is what she calls self-defeating behaviors. So lots of the largest insurers in the world, most of them are still have substantial, they're substantial holders and influential holders of fossil fuels assets or risks they're covering, and that, you know, that kind of creates a problem, a tension in what they're doing around climate and green risk, and it potentially creates a sort of distortion in the pricing, I suppose, in that they're pricing according to fossil fuel stuff, not climate and green change stuff. So that is complicated. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but she's calling that one out. And it's those kind of measures that obscure the kind of appropriate pricing of climate-related risks. And then she says there are some then other issues, which are things like governments, and particularly US states, who are restricting, for sometimes political reasons, the rate rises that the insurers want to make. Recently, California agreed to rate rises on key risks, I think flood and wind risks, and they've gone up. She said that's progress, but it's still usually, or often, the political interest that gets there first and causes problems for the industry. And the other thing is that she's saying that a lot of the time the governments are now tending to go to government-backed initiatives like the Florida's state safety net or the UK's flood re, things like that, saying that those are kind of also distorting what the insurance industry is doing, because the government is sort of taking the place of the insurer for these risks. So the market's not working very well, I suppose, is a summation of all of this at the moment on a really important issue, and insurance is in the front line. And the final point I think that's interesting and is made by this, not just by her in her article, but also by the deputy CEO of AXA, who say, and he says that the insurers and governments didn't place enough strict emphasis on prevention, and that society now has to do that and insurers have to do that. In other words, if we think of it just from an insurance perspective, the industry really now needs to think about what is its role in educating and helping and using its data and its knowledge and its products and its innovation to show society how, work with society in terms of preventing these risks, as opposed to just doing the typical insurance stuff of writing a policy and then paying out on a claim.
Yeah. So they're really interesting points, aren't they? The last point, your first point around, to me, is around innovation. You've just mentioned it there, but kind of innovation in thinking, often falling back to kind of traditional ways of working, traditional processes, traditional systems, traditional models, and not being creative enough to think about new risks and how we might tackle them and avoid them, hopefully. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. And for me, the kind of the interesting and maybe kind of to counter this argument, I suppose, is that I really feel, and I felt at the conference last week, is that there has been a tipping point, or we're at that tipping point where the industry does have new tools through technology. There is another generation coming through of senior leaders that are thinking more creatively about problems, and there is more of a focus around client service and that type of thing. So, if I was to put the other side of the argument, yes, of course, I take all these points, but I don't think it's such a doom cycle. I think we might be actually at a tipping point where we're going to recalibrate, and actually we might be entering a period of a kind of very innovative period where we use technology, data, and new skills and creative thinking in different ways. It's quite, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not sure what I feel about whether I'm optimistic or not optimistic, but I do think that you're right about if you like, at the smaller end of the industry, because this is a big message that she's giving. At the kind of grassroots level of the industry, I think there are all sorts of people with all sorts of ideas and technologies that could do this. I think, though, that my sense of this is that the argument is very firmly fixed on the very largest, capital-rich businesses, institutional finance businesses in the insurance industry, which is to say, if you can you need to work your businesses in a different way. You need to almost change the model somehow to make it a much more about prevention rather than cure, as it were. And therefore, if you could do that, I think it does it kind of fits with your argument that then they will sweep up this kind of innovation, people who want to do this stuff and absolutely feel it's essential to do it. So, but as long as the industry does not necessarily address that, because it's because of its profit margins on old-fashioned, fossil fuels or whatever, it's not going to change enough or sufficiently. So I think it's a big argument, and government's involved in it and society in general. But for me, it's a great challenge for the industry, really, and the leadership to say we can help it. We can really make this happen. But we have to manage it, and we have to have that vision and the strategies for that to happen.
Yeah,
because we can already see the problems,
Indeed. Right, thanks for that, Ben. That's kicked us off nicely. I'll tell you what, I'm going to bring in my my bit of news, because it kind of it's we bring in AI and like loads of people just start commenting. I'm sick of AI. Oh, I love it. But anyway, there was this report that I saw on Slipcase. Yeah, it is the
I'm
yin and
saying it
yang.
and you love it.
I love it. I don't love it.
You love
Not
it.
in that kind of way. But I think it's interesting.
Polarizing.
It's a polarizing debate. So this report, I thought it was quite good in the sense that it wasn't going, AI is amazing, it's going to change insurance like forever. But on the other hand, it was a bit disappointing because it didn't go far enough for me. So I just thought, I know, sorry about this. So so as it is talking about reinsurance really in this article, and how it can be used. So it made a few interesting points, nothing earth-shattering, but it was still pretty good and easy to read, written in decent language. So it's good to call out. And saying that it can unlock lots of value in natural language, in contracts, claims, and reports. And we all know that, and all the user cases that I've seen at the events and at the breakfast briefings and whatnot are around that kind of data extraction and being able to filter out and extract value from that, and that's all fine. And here it just goes and just basically says that the user cases here are about data extraction and unstructured data and all that kind of thing. And then it kind of goes, and generative AI will fundamentally change how unstructured data is processed within reinsurance. But beyond that, it's impossible to predict how it's going to advance. And you kind of go, yes, that's, no one can predict the future, as we always talk about. But you've got to be a bit more creative, because it seemed to me in this article that they were then went on to say, well, you've got predictive kind of AI and you've got generative AI. Generative AI will not be, will not kind of oust predictive AI in reinsurance, because the models are all there, but it'll just enhance it. I was going, well, that is quite, if that's your position, but you think it's fundamentally going to change reinsurance, you got to get on a faster bus or something. So you're going to miss out. And it comes back to the point I was making about creative thinking earlier. If everybody is thinking, how do we use these types of technologies to solve traditional processes? And the only answer is, you just use them to extract data. And it's just not very creative. And I don't know, I just get a bit frustrated by this kind of circular argument that that's the only way it's going to impact the industry.
Well, you're just disappointed it's not going to change the world. And I think I kind of tend to agree that conclusion at the end, that at the moment given we've been through all the hype, we've been through quite a lot of hype cycles, blockchain, and all the rest of them. I think it's somewhat sensible, this is just giving the opposing view, I suppose, is that you say, well, where can it change? And in the near future, will it do that? And it may be that is a fundamental change. I mean, it may be that what that does is releases time and energy to do other things. And that's been the problem that we've had.
Yeah.
One of the arguments for technology is often creates more work than it replaces. And I think that's largely been true in terms of my career. It's created more work, which is sometimes good work and sometimes just frustrating because the computer won't work and you spend time fixing it for hours, with people, and industries based on that. So I sort of think that it's I know it frustrates you that there's not, the golden land is not visible yet. It seems quite a sensible view to take in some ways, that we really don't know. And actually, partly because of language, will it even be called AI in the future? We might have another name for it, because you just, your commentary there was full of a lot of words that we weren't using 6 months ago.
Yes.
Generative AI and predictive AI.
Yes, true.
It's the language, and it's changing all the time. So it's hard to keep. It is hard to keep up with it. I get it.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and they were talking about kind of trust in technology, and they were talking about kind of the SME space, and they were talking about insurance, and they were basically saying they believed that kind of, let's just take manufacturing. They have a whole load of data at the moment, production data, HR data, logistics, telematics from their trucks, whatever data. So they have, and they're all quite siloed, and there just seemed to be a great opportunity to pull all that together. To your points about mitigating risks in the earlier piece, in order to deliver a service called insurance that wasn't just indemnity. And I think, and the reason I thought that there was an opportunity is because the next generation and the generation after that will trust more in computers as the software becomes more accurate, and it gives you the answers that you want, and we will live in a world, a commercial world I'm talking about here, where people make decisions or computers make decisions, and so long as you understand what's happening behind the scenes and the programs and the software and stuff, you're gonna trust the computer. I don't know, it's just quite an interesting hypothesis, I suppose.
Well, your point about trust is very important. I mean, I do think you have. I mean, but in the end, you are also then, particularly with AI, and from what I've read, is you're putting trust in things that even the people who do the programs for AI don't understand. So it's like, I hear as much about the fears of AI, which in other words is that it would, be biased in ways that people weren't realizing and things like that in insurance, as I do about the positives. So I do think it's a thing. It's happening. It's real, but it has its limitations, people would say, and but it's the other point, I suppose, is it's being invested in heavily, and there are people who believe, like they're like messianic about it.
I don't want to be a.
They lie awake at night thinking about AI and what will it have happened in the morning. But no, I'm only joking. I mean, I do think though that there's excitement about it and interest, but it also feels to me like it's being. This is the sticker on everything. I heard someone on the radio the other day who was being questioned on the business section of the program about where the results have been so terrible, and he said, "Well, yeah, they have been terrible, but they're getting better. And guess what? AI is coming, and 50% of the world's business will be done on AI soon." As if that was an excuse and would save his business. I just thought I could tell that in the script, whoever wrote his thing for when he went on Radio 4 was thinking, well, I'll just chuck the old AI thing because that sounds great. And it's going on the end of every speech now. I think there was an ABI speech where the other night, which I read, the last sentence of that was, and we've got to get to grips with AI, and that's the most important thing. But it doesn't. That's all it says. Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of
talk about it forever, couldn't we? Good. Well, anyway, I thought it was an interesting article, and it starts a debate between us. Divisive
article.
There we are. Right, let's move things on to something a little bit lighter. So, Snoop Dogg. So we've our man in the US. He's released some wine. Do you want to hear what he's got to say about it?
Yeah.
I've never been a wine expert, and I didn't want Collie by Snoop to be something that people found pretentious. In that world, they talk about delicacies and age and all sorts of stuff you don't need to know to actually enjoy it. So I just picked a wine from California. It reminds me of my West Coast roots and has a fresh, fruity taste. I focused on the flavor and bringing the California lifestyle to the product and let the experts do their thing. Whether you're kicking back, cooking up a storm in the kitchen, or sharing with the crew, sipped over ice with a playlist to match, my wine brings a little slice of that chilled Collie lifestyle.
There you go. So you shared this with me, Ben, but I think it's brilliant. Yeah, so Snoop Dogg, I've actually got his cookbook. It's called From Criminal to Cook. It's just really funny.
Wait,
And he,
what's his second one? From criminal to sommelier.
yeah, that's it. What I love about it in the article, they go, "What what does the wine go with?" He went, "Yeah, everything."
Yes, I saw that. Yeah, it goes with everything. Well, rosé
Goes with
kind of
everything.
does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Well, it's celebrity wine, isn't it? They're all doing it. They're all at it. They're all making money off it. And
yeah,
Snoop, I like the fact he's got a rosé T-shirt as well to
yeah.
match.
Looks
Um,
very happy.
so my favourite line in all of that is, "Drink wine when you're kicking back with the crew," and I don't even know what that really means, but it's like I never thought of when I drank a glass of wine that I'd be doing it kicking back with the crew.
No, maybe like on a ferry, you know, when the people knock off, you just, have you finished? Yeah, is it docked? Yeah,
I think
come on.
that's really why you're showing your age now.
Yeah, there you go.
Not down with the kids. But yeah, no, good old Snoop Dogg. Maybe it's because we've been giving him a bit of the old publicity on our show that he's decided to go off the back of that.
Yeah, probably. You know. Right. Shall we play
We'll
this?
get a bottle when it comes out, by the way. We'll buy a bottle and drink it on here and do a tasting.
Yeah, let's do. Yeah, definitely. Right, let's do this.
Hey there! What's the word on the data stream?
So this is the Ritson article, or I'll tell you what, you introduce it and tell me when you want the slide up, because otherwise I ruin it.
You always ruin it.
I know.
Hold off. So, generational differences. That's what we're talking about. Generation Z, Gen Z, millennials, another load of buzzwords that have been around for quite a long time. Still used, still all deployed because they keep getting a new generation coming through. This is has been one of my frustrations, actually, which is that I don't experience, this is going to be a controversial statement if anybody's listening, which is I don't really see these generational differences being very meaningful. And Mark Ritson has just written this article in Marketing Week. He is a kind of leading commentator on the marketing industry, and he's not afraid to call out stuff in a rather sweary fashion when he does see it. Now, but it's a serious commentary here. And so what this article is talking about is saying, can we really do anything with, or is it worthwhile looking at these demographic differences? You know, so a demographic obviously is like just gender, men and women, Gen Z, Gen X, you know, whatever. So those are the sort of things that you think people, I guess, like me, look at all the time. But I've never really done much of that in the data that we've ever looked at. I've tended to look at more practical things like, you know, what business are you in? What do you do? What are your behaviors? Those sorts of things. And this is really what Ritson is saying, but he's backed up by a big study that's been looked at and some work that's been done by the Venerable Pew Institute, which is a non-partisan big research business in the US, which looks at all sorts of things. But they've been looking at these and talking about why generational differences really are very difficult to work with, and why they're not going to work with them anymore.
Right.
And so what they're really saying is they're really, the concern that they have about them is they're not provable in data. So obviously it's very easy to say that you're Gen X or Gen Z, and it absolutely correlates with your age. You know, you can't disentangle the two. You know, you are that age and therefore you're this. But what you need to know is, are Gen Z different from Gen X or whatever? Yeah, of course they are, because one's older and one's younger, and there are some differences in attitudes. You know, one being Gen Z tend to think that companies, for example, should have a kind of social purpose more than older people. But, you know, will that change? I mean, is it just because they're younger, i.e. they'll become more conservative as they get older and have the same opinions, and we're just rolling through the same thing of young people come in, have slightly different attitudes, slightly more liberal perhaps, or whatever, or socially concerned, whatever it is, and then they later on change to just your average kind of more conservative older person. So really what they're saying is these are potentially just stereotypes. And if you're going to really understand, what you really need to understand is, are Gen Z people of this age now different from Gen Z, young people back in previous generations without giving them labels. And so they say you have to go back 50 years or more in data sets to look at that, to say, are these attitudes really changing? And what they found is there aren't really that many differences. So they're saying that actually, generally speaking, they're too broad brush. I mean, why say that, there's, I don't know how many million Gen Zs, or there are 100 million of them, but that's in marketing terms, it's very, very broad to say they all think this. And it's like, Ritson uses the analogy in here that you say that I'm not marketing my expensive luxury champagne to Scottish people because they're generally too tight, and he said that would be offensive, and it would be wrong in demographic terms, because there's all sorts of, under the banner Scottish, all sorts of different people, many of whom would love to buy luxury champagne. So, and he puts up, so you can put the chart up now. So he calls it the Orangina effect, and it was this company BBH Labs which looked at what they call group cohesion for different segments on these demographics, and they found that actually the strongest, look at Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, you can see there is some cohesion, but it might just be, and boomers and all that. But actually, you can take something ridiculous like Orangina drinkers, and they have much more social cohesion as a group. So what it's really saying is Gen Z sounds important. It sounds like, yes, we've really cracked it, because we can market to these people, and we can do, I saw an organization the other day that's doing a Gen Z conference, as if Gen Z people are of a type, of a particular thing, but they could have done an Orangina drinkers conference, and it would have had more social cohesion, and those people would have interrelated to each other more than the Gen Z group. So what I'm really saying is we've got to, when we're talking about talent development and attraction and things like that, I think this is kind of lazy, and it doesn't get us to solutions. We need to say, I was having a conversation yesterday, pay and rations really matter. How people do, this, yes, it may well be important to know that the insurance industry has got a social purpose of some kind, but don't just attach that to Gen Z to say that's what Gen Z thinks and not what boomers think, because that's a mistake, and you start to target your messages at the wrong groups of people. So I think we should start to move away from this and start to be much more practical and pragmatic about how we look at the issues in the market, rather than just this generational labels, as they're called.
Yeah, indeed. So that's really interesting, and I totally agree with all of that. The thing that I would add from the meeting that I ran on Tuesday, where talent and recruitment and retention was one of the hot topics of debate with the group, and this is a group of senior practitioners, mainly from the London Market Claims community. But they were talking about the scarcity of new talent entering the sector, the impact on wage inflation with relatively junior people being able to command higher salaries. But on the flip side of that, you can look at inflation and actually, if you want to work and live in London, you need more money, and also the relationship in building teams between kind of senior people who may be in that baby boomers category, and then bringing in new people. Now that isn't and that is about communication between the groups and sharing information and knowledge, and being able to kind of cross, not the divide, but just bring people together into under the, and it might be around purpose, or it might be around something else within the team, but having, like you say, by just saying it's a generational thing, that why would young people get on with older people? Well, I mean, you just get on with people, right?
Well, of course, and that's exactly what I've seen and experienced in working with companies and groups of people to improve performance, for example. I don't sit there thinking there's the young lot, the Gen Zs, and there's the older lot. I actually think that when I do notice things, it's like experienced people passing on experience to younger people, or younger people saying, what if we did something with a computer that I learned, the other day, because I just happen to be a younger person who's perhaps more au fait with technology, because I grew up, in schools that had laptops and PC, from the day I was, educated. That's not a Gen Z characteristic. It's not some different thing going on with those human beings. It's just the fact that you could attract it back in the data to say, well, they went into school at 5 and they were on a computer and they're more adept. So that's it. So but that, that learning goes on, and it goes both ways, I think. And it's not as if, I've always said, it's not the idea that older people, for example, are not very good with technology. I just think is rubbish. When you come to travel, I mean, when you go to book your seats on BA or whatever, you get there and there's like about 70% of it is like 70-year-olds on the flight who've all managed somehow on the app to get on the app, book the seats. So it's not like they don't get technology or something, because they're different types. And I think the end of this kind of whole piece was, that when you're looking at talent, it's like this quote here, which is, what really matters at work are not actual differences between generations, but what's happened is it's people believing that those differences exist. And that's where I think you get a problem, which is if you start, which a lot of people do, by saying, what we've got to do, right, is focus on Gen Z or Gen X or millennials, and then it'll all be all right, because we've worked out, because they're all different. But that's your first mistake, is that they're not. And the data shows that. This is what the Harvard Business Review did, all these big studies have shown there's no real differences.
Yeah.
Other than the fact of the social circumstances, the times or whatever, and the way people respond, they're not that different. I mean, I don't feel, to me, that young people that I know, including my kids, are that different. I mean, not really, fundamentally. I don't see them as, I don't put a label on going, you're Gen Z, to my kids. Yeah.
I mean, back in my day, I could work the video recorder and my mum and dad couldn't, right? But now my kids can work the computer and the skybox, and I keep going, how do you do this? I want to play a clip from an earlier show, Ben. This is Caroline Bedford, and she's talking a little bit about this. I think it's relevant. So here we go.
Absolutely. And you know what, we're so pleased about that, because the word generalist historically has felt that you're getting somebody who's got a lot of capability, but they're a bit diluted. It wasn't everything as a positive. And I think that's because the term generalist hasn't been understood. And what that, from our perspective, generalist doesn't mean that you don't have deep expertise somewhere, because of course you do. But what it means is that you have a broad horizontal cross section of skills. You have underwriters, adjusters, actuaries who have got and need deep-seated knowledge of environmental change, social governance. People who have to have a really deep data appreciation, and as Helen will always say, not only understand what data can do, but understand how organizations can interact with it, gain insight from it, and create that feedback loop. You've got what we call people becoming more intrapreneurial within their organizations. So having those entrepreneurial capabilities, but working within an organization and helping them develop. These are the things that we class as generalist skills, which whatever your role in the insurance arena, you're going to need to have these to be able to navigate that change and accelerated pace that is happening now.
So yeah, it's really just highlighting what we've just said. Having.
I do think that's relevant, and I think what it shows you is that what Caroline's talking about very well there is a thoughtful analysis, really, of what is important in the workplace going forward. And I think their organisation does an excellent job on that, by the way. But there were no real buzzwords in there. That was really about, look, this is the skills, the capabilities that you need. It wasn't about age and generational differences. I'm sure there are younger and older differences. We know that. But putting these labels become so reductive. So if Caroline had started by saying, well, this is all about Gen Z and don't care about who this, and guess what, they're all going to change the world, and they're not going to change the world. What they're going to do is what everybody, well, we know the world is just doing all the same sort of bad and good things it's done for millennia. So you can see the evidence, but I think you've got to go down that much more down that route of being careful about the data, somewhat empirical, and not going for these lazy sort of stereotypes, really.
Yeah. Good. Okay. I think we've done that, haven't we?
We've done it. Well, we'll probably argue about it with people, but that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Right. So I was just going to talk a little bit about the TIN membership that we launched. So we have kind of rebooted the membership of the insurance network. So as you know, Ben, we run a series of events, but we got quite a bit of feedback about could we put together kind of smaller seminar groups in between the kind of big conferences. So that's kind of what we've done, and relaunched the membership around it, around special interest groups. So they're going to be quite tight special interest groups around different topic areas. As we were talking about before, we've got one on London market claims, one on the blueprint, which I'm sure you'll be loving, one on AI, Ben. So be joining that.
You're not selling it to me.
So it's quite interesting though. So we ran the first meeting last Tuesday, and it was really good because there's no vendors in the room, and we tried to make sure we have practitioners. So actually what we're trying to do is create a forum where people can really kind of talk about their challenges, and hopefully we can raise the bar for the industry as a whole in terms of best practice and approaches to whatever it is, using tech, talent, or whatever else. So we'll keep you posted. What we're going to do is, as the outcomes from those meetings come out, we'll probably just review them on here. We might get some people to come and talk about them. I was thinking actually, as we were having a chat about AI, we should probably contact Paul Willoughby again, because I think he's got some interesting insights into how other organizations, perhaps outside of insurance, are leveraging that tech, which I think is pretty interesting. So there we go. So I just thought I'd mention that as
good. Yeah, it's a good initiative, and you've got so many topics to go at, haven't you, really?
Yes. So and there's so much change.
Boring ones like AI and what was that other one?
The blueprint.
Blueprint.
You know,
yeah, get those out of the way. Then go into the
Yeah. We have got stuff that you'd like, Ben. It's just that I'm not telling you. So
what like?
I don't want you to join.
Oh, I want to go now. I've got
it.
FOMO.
That's it. It's working. Good. Okay. What are you doing this weekend, Ben?
We have to do a big piece on this, won't we? I'm doing a bit of rock climbing, I think, again. And then
I'm gonna come to your rock climbing area or whatever it is. I'm gonna film it.
Okay.
And then I'll interview you while you're up there about insurance topics.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Rock climbing and insurance. It's a good mix.
Ben on the rocks.
Yes, it is. I don't know what. I mean, there's a risk element, and there's some stuff in there that does relate to insurance. Obviously, we could ask the owners about their liability insurance and how that's panning out. Yeah.
While you're lying on the floor going, oh.
Yeah. But I suspect there's always an insurance angle, isn't there? But yeah, if you want to come down and watch, you could join in.
No, I don't think I'm strong enough.
Well, it's technique.
I don't think I've got the technique then.
It's legs, not arms. And
there we go.
Anybody can do it. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
I often hear that, and then it's not true. No, come on. Yeah, let's do it. We'll do it.
Let's do that. I'm gonna go fishing because I watched the. I didn't realize there was another series of Gone Fishing, and I've just came through it, and now I want to go fishing. So I'm gonna go fishing. So that's it.
Well, we could do that together as well, actually, because then we can actually do a show that's coherent, because we both like fishing, don't we? We do it, so we could go somewhere. And we could do 2 shows in a day. We could film 3 or 4 fishing, but that might be too many. But yeah, that's a good idea as well.
Just ideas central, isn't it? Just
it is. That's good. So enjoy.
Good. Right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will be back.
Beaver Tour of the Regions, by the way, next week. Just to say, I'll be speaking on the Beaver Tour of the Regions in Leicester.
Oh, good.
We didn't do Tour of the Regions this week, did we? I'm in Leicester and Birmingham Wednesday, Thursday next week. So
okay,
that's it.
Good. So we'll get some feedback on that then.
There will be some Birmingham brummy feedback.
Right. Good.
Good, that wasn't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Letters to Ben if you were offended by anything he said. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.